Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's episode, we look ahead to El Clasico this weekend, talking through Barcelona and Real Madrid's form in the League and Champions League going in, the key matchups, where the game could be won and lost, as well as discussing Xabi Alonso. Leverkusen expect to lose him. Could Manchester City be lining him up to replace Pep? That's all on today's episode. So we're back for another episode. And when I say we, I mean me, Patrick Van Straten, and Ravi Ramaneni. It's good to see you, Ravi.
Hey, Patrick, how are you? Great to see you again.
I'm good. I'm excited to get into this. It's always fun to talk Spanish football with you, and we've got a really juicy game. And I think it's kind of needed because we've been talking a lot about Real Madrid and Barcelona, but neither one of them have played that many real sides. So we're going to talk about El Clasico. We're going to talk about the lineups, make some predictions too. But before we do that, should we talk about the Champions League matches? That's the context, right? Real Madrid last night beat Dortmund in the Champions League, went down 2-0 early on, and then kind of flipped the switch, realized that they were playing a game of football and that they should wake up, and ended up winning 5-2. What do you think we can learn from this game, Ravi?
I mean, I think we've learned this, or we've seen this movie enough times in the past. I think if you remember last edition of the Champions League, almost every knockout game at the Bernabeu had the same pattern. Maybe did not have that many goals, but they would be trailing, or they would be in the match would be hanging in balance around the 60th or 70th minute. And then within 10, 15 minutes, everything changes. And Real Madrid has been doing this forever, especially in the Champions League tournament. I think there is something, as much as we want to be analytical, and there is no analytical explanation to this. I think it's there is a certain level of, I think, the building, and in Spanish they call it like, your legs get heavy after 60th minute in the Bernabeu. It's a more colloquial expression, and then everything becomes harder for visiting teams there, and I think that is true. And it always looked like that in the first half, Madrid didn't even prepare for this game. Like most of these games look like that, and then come second half they flip a switch. And everybody looks like Lucas Vazquez looks like a world beater. It's very who looks so ordinary in the first half. Yeah, I think we can kind of leave that part alone because there's not much to explain there. It's what Real Madrid has been doing this over and over again. I thought it was interesting just to talk about more things. Like in the first half, they still had a good amount of shots. They still had more shots than Dortmund, but they didn't score. And then second half, they dominated them 17 shots to 2. It was not even a personnel change, at least until the 70th minute when it was already 2-2. And you knew the tide has turned by then. There was only going to be one winner in that game at that point. It's like, it was just it's a tale of two halves. And, there are a number of cliches you could drop here.
Yeah. It was we were saying off air that it's a testament to the reputations of both Real Madrid and Dortmund, that when Dortmund were 2-0 up at halftime, no one thought Dortmund are going to win this game. Really? Yeah. I mean, it's always possible, but what is interesting, I think, is just what a soft lineup Real Madrid played. So attack-wise, obviously, part of the drama here is the order in which the goals went in. If Bellingham scores that header in the first half, if one of those ones that hits the bar goes in, then it doesn't look like quite such a catastrophic collapse from Dortmund, and maybe such an amazing comeback from Real. But you look at the lineup in this game, and Real Madrid put out that front three of Mbappe, Vini, and Rodrygo, which is not the hardest pressing front line that you could find, and the midfield three of Modric, Bellingham, and Valverde. And you kind of think it's not that surprising that a team was able to walk through this. And look, the attack was pretty solid in this game, but the defense, I thought, was honestly shocking.
Yeah, I mean, especially when I saw this lineup, this is the most attacking lineup they could put out with Modric in there, so they have a good amount of ball progression with him. We can find these runners, all these attackers in front. One of the dilemmas and the conundrums that Real Madrid is trying to solve this year is obviously Kroos is has retired, and Modric is 39. And the other day he turned out to be the oldest player to play minutes for Real Madrid in a La Liga game against Celta Vigo. So he can't play 90 minutes. I think when he's on the field, he definitely still looks the part, very elite. But he cannot play 90 minutes every 3 days. So I think they have this problem. And against Celta Vigo, they lined up Valverde, Camavinga, and Tchouaméni as the midfield three. Now, you look at that's completely to the other extreme, that there is really no ball progression in that group. Like, sure, they can pass the ball, but I think finding the right passes with the right weight, right time, it's not there. I think that game up until 60th minute was in balance in Vigo, and Modric comes on, and then it's a different game after that. So I think they realized that against tough opponents, Champions League caliber opponents, they do need somebody like a Modric in the midfield. Now, the balance of this breaks with the fact that you have Jude, you have Rodrygo, you have Mbappe, you have Vinicius. I think that's where, as you said, like out of possession, when they have to press, try to win the ball back, those are the areas they suffer. And so it becomes that teams can pass through them pretty easily. And then it takes them longer time to recover the ball. And I think if Dortmund was any, as you mentioned, Dortmund is not is one of the leakiest sides in Europe. So they probably thought this game we're going to outscore them. And, to be honest, my prediction when I saw the lineups was it's either a 4-1 or a 5-2 game. I think I posted it on the Slack. But it was just purely based on looking at the lineups. It's like, there is no way Real Madrid is going to keep a clean sheet in this game. They're going to concede multiple goals. And, at halftime, I thought maybe I made a mistake. But I know Real Madrid kind of lived up to the billing. But yeah, that's the problem. Like the balance in the midfield in terms of pressing / out of possession worked, and how much attacking that they can do with that front. You can call front six or front four. Who you count there, and how to structure that so that they can play against the tougher sides and still come out, still win those games.
Yeah, I mean, Bellingham last season really had a bit of an evolution as a passer. We got far more final third production out of him, more passes into the penalty area, and it looked like he could mature into that more creative passing presence. And that's obviously still on the cards. He's still extremely young. He had quite a slow start to the season because of injury. But yeah, right now you look at their midfield and I think, well, I see how this midfield could make Real Madrid very hard to play against, but it doesn't really have that incisive presence, like you're saying. And of course, these guys are having to work overtime because the attackers don't do that much defensively, and the fullbacks in particular are pretty atrocious. Or at least Ferland Mendy, who previously I've been kind of okay with, had a really bad game, I thought, against Dortmund. Just backed off Marlon for the second goal. The first goal, it just felt like nobody was really tracking guys running into the box from wide. Lucas Vazquez may have scored a goal in the second half, but the way he just let Gittins get past him for the second goal was pretty shocking stuff. And so you can kind of understand why they've experimented with some stuff. Fran Garcia played at the weekend. They kind of also were flexing between, like that back three and a midfield three, with Tchouaméni dropping in. Is there a way you think? I guess we'll come on to this as we get into the lineups for El Clasico, but is there a way to mitigate this kind of problem? You have such a lack of talent in these wide positions. I don't know what you can do.
You have to. I think the real problem is the midfield. Like, think about it. A couple of years ago, they were Casemiro, Kroos, Modric. That's the midfield. Look what we have today. Well, maybe Modric was a little bit over the hill at the time, but still he was much better he's much younger than now, like 2 years younger, 3 years younger than now. Casemiro is your defensive presence. Kroos is the one connector. Like, that's a very balanced midfield. That's very elite midfield. Now we're talking about Valverde. Even though he's taken Cruz's number, he's definitely not as quite as a prolific passer. I think he's more of a runner with the ball. So is a different position. So they're missing that midfield intelligence, midfield hub that could connect a lot of these pieces. Like Real Madrid, if you look at their attacking pieces, they always put together like this Galactico mindset, right? It's not that there is this game model where they want pieces to fit. They will say, these are the best players. We're going to put them on the field and we'll figure things out, which is what is happening too with Mbappe and Vinicius and, Jude, Rodrygo. A lot of them wants to play towards the left. They, if given the option or the freedom, they'll all want to play on the left side or come from the left side. So the problem was solved in the midfield, that they had that balance and they had that quality in the midfield. I think they have to look outside and try to sign like a really good midfielder. Now, obviously, we've heard rumors about Rodri being a big target. That's the kind of player I think that could change, that could bring that balance back to this side. But for now, either way, they have to either go to one extreme or the other. If they play Kamavinga in the midfield, they're going to get a lot more work out of possession, a lot more ball winning, a lot more of that. But they're going to decrease in terms of how they can pass. They'll decline a bit. So it's that balance that they are trying to find. And, Modric can come on in games and then change games. So the idea is if you keep the game close for 60 minutes, some days, and Modric can come in 30 and then, solve this problem. But football, is very, you can't really plan that to that detail. It can go any way. So I think that's the big problem for them, the midfield. I think the attackers is more of a symptom. I think they still, for my liking, and they still need a number 9. Like, it's more of a somebody that has the movements of a number 9 rather than just someone that can play as a number 9. And so I think that would solve the problem. But then the way the current attack is set up, all the attackers, that balance is not there yet. I think Mbappe and Vinicius are slowly figuring out things. I think they switch who plays wider and who plays inside a lot. And, that's something that I think they're kind of figuring out. But still, I think this team has a lot of, I think there's been too much of a churn, both on the attack side and clearly in the midfield, that they haven't been able to overcome yet.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I understand that they're looking for a replacement, I guess, and thinking about who could fill that Modric hole going forward as well. But firstly, I just don't know how recruitable those players are. I mean, obviously, if you say, "Oh, Rodri would be great as a Kroos replacement," sure, but I don't know if you can get him.
Yeah.
That doesn't really seem reasonable. And generally speaking, Real Madrid have recruited guys who profiled as outstanding passers on other clubs. And then when they get to Real Madrid, you're kind of like, well, this guy is a good passer. He's good enough to pass for Real Madrid, but he's not a Toni Kroos level passer, which is what we need now. So plus, of course, we're already talking about a situation with Real Madrid where they've got too many pieces for the number of slots they've got. I understand that they need a different profile, but it does just seem like that's going to hasten the time when they maybe have to sell one of these midfielders or maybe move on one of these attackers, which is quite a worrying prospect as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the front four, the attackers, Mbappe, Vinicius, Rodrygo, Bellingham, for me, surely I think Rodrygo is on the way out. I think, as much as people will maybe scoff at us for saying that, but if you look at how things have been, I think he's the one who looks like the odd man out here. And by end of this season, I won't be surprised if he moved in the summer. So I think I think that probably will set up, start kind of bringing that balance back. But you're right, it's hard to find a replacement for a Toni Kroos or a Luka Modric, even if you're willing to spend unlimited amount of money. Rodri is there, is under contract with City till 27. So it's not like it's a straightforward thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to come back to Real Madrid's lineup shortly because we're going to maybe talk about how these teams could set themselves up for El Clasico. Shall we just have a quick look at Barcelona, who play Bayern Munich tonight in what I think would have to be considered the kind of premier matchup of the Champions League so far. These are two teams who Kim called in the newsletter the best teams in the world right now. Barcelona, because they lost that first Champions League game against Monaco, I suspect will be tempted to go quite hard. They also are not going to want to lose to Bayern Munich at home. But in my view, if they could stomach it, it would make sense to rotate for this one because they've still got 5 Champions League fixtures after this. Dortmund, Brest, Red Star, these are very winnable games in there. They could probably throw the dice here and rely on getting the points they need versus those other teams. I suspect they won't do that, right?
I suspect they won't do that either. I think this game is interesting for me from a tactical perspective of probably two of the best center forwards, like the kind of in the game right now, Lewandowski and Harry Kane playing in this game. Bayern's hasn't been tested at all. I think the 2 games they played against good opponents that's not right. I think they beat Freiburg, who are 3rd in the table right now. They 1-1 draw against Leverkusen and 3-3 draw against Frankfurt. I think those are the 2 games where they dropped points. Beyond that, I think they've been perfect.
They lost to Villa in the Champions League.
In the Champions League. Yes, they lost to Villa. So I think this is another test for them away from home, and playing against a really good team. I don't expect this to be very easy for them. It all depends on the lineup from Barcelona, as you said. They can, because they also have a day less in terms of rest. Although at this level, I think teams are used to that type of stuff. Sometimes they have 1 day less, sometimes they have 1 day more. So I don't think that itself, that is going to be like a major determining factor, but that will become a determining factor if you have, let's say if it was Real Madrid and Luka Modric. The older players will have harder time to recover faster. So if Real Madrid played today and Modric started and played 70 minutes, I think it's highly unlikely he would start the next game. But I think Barcelona will be interested to see what they throw out, because they also have some big guys coming back from injury. Dani Olmo, Gavi, he played a few minutes over the weekend.
He did.
So I think that they might. Ansu Fati played. I think it was his first start.
Yeah, he did.
In a long time. So they do have, I think, more pieces, so they can rotate and not really have such a drop off in quality, like the way they rotated against Osasuna, where they completely just disturbed the balance of the team and ended up losing that game. I think a lot of this game will depend on what lineup Barcelona put out. I think it'll be fairly strong. If anything, they might rotate 1 or 2 players. I think a lot of it also, I would think they already have a lineup in mind for the Clasico. And then now you work off of that. Who are the players that you are reasonably confident that will be able to recover in 48 hours to 56 hours and play that game? I think that's probably how they are approaching this.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Gavi is the key guy there. Getting him, I don't know, maybe half an hour, maybe a full half if they can.
Yeah.
Depending on how he's doing. That's quite good. To get him that time against an elite side, because going into El Clasico, when I look at Barcelona's team, I just think the weak area for me is central midfield. We've talked about it this season that it's been kind of thin. I would be trying to get Gavi straight into that lineup if I could, if I were Hansi Flick. Because Real Madrid, while they may not be able to play exactly the way they want with their midfield, they can gum things up pretty nicely if they want. They've got these incredibly rangy, pretty hard-working guys in there. And Barcelona have kind of their second string because obviously, Bernal went down. And so it was Casado Pedri at the weekend. And Rafinha was really doing the lion's share of defensive work for them against Sevilla. Rafinha had 5 tackles and had 5 tackles, I think. And Pedri and Casado had 4 tackles and interceptions between them. So they rely on a lot. They rely on their front line for a lot of defensive work. I don't know how well that's going to work against Bayern or against Real Madrid.
I think it would be completely different challenges. Both of them are games. I think Bayern will be, it'll be harder for them. I think the front line defending from the front against Bayern would be harder, I would think, than Real Madrid in a league game. I think to a degree, I think Bayern, there are some elements of their style that are similar to Barcelona. I think with Real Madrid, I think they're very different. Like I think that there is a complete difference in philosophy of how they play. So I think, as you said, so what do you think would be the front three they play against Bayern today?
I guess it depends how fit Olmo is. I mean, I'm assuming that they play Lewandowski, Yamal, and Rafinha. And then I don't know who plays on the left. Maybe they try Fati again. Like he was clearly the kind of weak link in that attack at the weekend. Not that it was a problem, but you look at the other guys, and all the other guys had over 1 expected goal and assist put together, and Fati was down at kind of 0.5. However, if Fati managed to rediscover some form, that would solve an awful lot of problems for Barcelona. So if I were Flick, I would probably be investing minutes wherever I could to try and make that happen. I just wouldn't want to risk Olmo, so I guess maybe I would start the same lineup again. And I think Ferran Torres is still out. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I would probably try Fati again, knowing that I could bring Olmo off the bench, knowing I can move things around. It doesn't really feel like there are a lot of options there unless you want to pull something really out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is maybe you go like a 4-3-3 and move Rafinha out there.
Sure.
That's the other way to do it. I was trying to do, for the Clasico, I was trying to do what could be the lineup. I think a lot depends on today. Obviously, they would want to come through today without any injuries or issues, and then go from there. So yeah, I can see them maybe even play like Olmo probably plays 30 minutes, I would think 30-40 minutes in the second half, just to give him more kind of reps. I think what they would want is that coming into the Clasico, they would want everybody available, like Fati, Gavi, Olmo, and had some minutes under their belt. Now, I think Gavi only played like 8 minutes, so that doesn't really count. So maybe he'll play like a 45 or a 30 today. And then he'll be like, okay, he's now had enough minutes, so they can, if they have to start him as a 6, they can go ahead and do it. So I think a lot of today would be making sure everybody's available for Saturday.
Okay. So Barcelona, maybe we have some ideas of what they might want to do, but obviously it's contingent on how everybody comes through today. Real Madrid, I think, much harder to predict. Real Madrid have lots of different ways they could set up for this particular match. I know where I think they'll go. I said, obviously Rodrygo's injured, right? So they're gonna have to do something there. And to be honest, it's kind of something I thought they'd do anyway. Especially given that in the Dortmund match, Camavinga comes on when it's still 2-2, and then they end up scoring another 3 goals. It kind of feels like Tchouaméni, Camavinga, these guys might well come in. With Rodrygo out, maybe it's that kind of diamond midfield.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other big injury news for Real Madrid is Courtois is injured.
Yeah.
So that would change something in the goal. I think Lunin has done well enough to deputize for Courtois in big games in the past. So it may not be like that much of a step down, but still, Courtois is Courtois. Like it's definitely like if you are Barcelona, you'd rather face Andre Lunin than Thibaut Courtois in the goal. So that's a big difference for them. I think in the midfield they would want Camavinga on the field. for sure. So this is how I kind of came up with the lineup for them. Obviously, Militao and Rudiger, the two center backs. Probably Vasquez starts as the right back. I think they don't have much options there. So what they can do here from here on is, I don't think, I think Rodrygo injury from a team selection perspective probably helps clears things a bit for them.
Yeah.
So that means that he can start the front three to be Mbappe, Bellingham, and Vinicius. Like if you take those three, then you could go Camavinga, Valverde, and Tchouaméni. So that would be the most defensive lineup, and then you play Fran Garcia at left back or Ferland Mendy at left back. You could do that. That's one way to do it, but it's at home, and if they want to be more, to your point of the diamond midfield, not sure if Modric can start, but I think they might do it for him and then say we'll give you rest in the next game type thing. Because it's a big Clasico, I'm sure like a professional like Luka Modric will be raring to go and play that. So if that is the case, they might start Camavinga at left back because that gives them the option. He will be on the field. That's what I'm saying. He one way or the other, he's on the field, either left back or as in the central midfield. Then that gives them the option to, like you said earlier, about going like a three in the back, and then Camavinga can come into the midfield to help with some of the balance in the midfield. If you think about it, like I think Barcelona would want to go through the midfield and have possession there, and they've been dominating possession even in the Hansi Flick era, where they are more deliberately direct in terms of how they attack goals and a lot of trying to win the ball back high up the field. And even with that change in philosophy, they're still very possession dominant. I think that will continue in this game. I think Real Madrid will want them to have the ball because Real Madrid will just want to find their guys in space. So if they can get Barcelona, suck them into possession, come in, commit numbers to it, and then spring open Mbappe or Vinicius on the wing, that would be probably the way they want to play this game. So for me, Real Madrid lineup, if it is diamond, it's either Modric. If Modric doesn't start, maybe Arda Güler there. I don't know if they will start him in this fixture, but it is, Modric has played 70 minutes, so they might say, well, you start the game and then Modric comes on in the second half. That might be. That's how I look at their lineup.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I thought that Modric would make sense to come on in the second half, just because if you can get away with not playing him, then I think it'd be better to have him to come on in the last half hour rather than playing him in, say, the first half and not really knowing what the game is, and then you don't really have him for the second. But if I were Barcelona, I'd be tempted to play this game much more conservatively, I think. Obviously they've been the best pressing team in Spain so far. The pass per defensive action is under 7. It's at 6.7. But Real Madrid are one of the best at playing out in the world. They're the best at playing out in La Liga. They're the hardest to press. And, we see this time and time again. Teams will press Real Madrid and maybe they have a few wobbles and then they kind of remember and they just don't really panic on the ball very much. Given that what they want to do is find Vinicius, Mbappe in space, get those guys 1v1 on defenders, it just seems like if you're Barcelona, I expect our press to be slightly less effective. If Modric doesn't start, certainly, I think I'm less concerned about letting Real Madrid have the ball.
Yes.
Because also I think, well, if Camavinga does start left back and he steps into midfield, we can leave Yamal high, then there's potentially space there where he might be in the open field up against Rudiger, which is, not easy, but it's not Rudiger's preferred zone to be isolated in. It might make sense for them to do something like that, because Real Madrid, we know how they want to play. they're probably going to kind of mid-block, be really stodgy, be a bit boring. Hope that, Modric or somebody like that produces some magic, or Vinicius. If you're Barcelona and you can just make life a little bit hard for them, I kind of think your chances of getting the opportunities you want go up.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, if you think about, you got a good point about Yamal and, versus the fullback. I think both teams, the weak spots are their fullbacks. If you look at, I mean, it's broadly speaking there. On one side, you have Balde, who's very attacking, very young. There's always space behind him to attack. And then Jules Koundé, I think he's more defensive, but if you have to find what are the weakest spots in this team, then you're going to say both sides have really strong wingers and suspect fullbacks. So I think both teams would want the game to go through their strengths and versus the weakest spots. But I think the way they want to do it would be different, as we talked earlier. That Madrid probably would want to get to their wingers in space sooner. I think Barcelona would want their wingers to come into play as they get closer to the final third. Yamal on the ball in the last third. I think that's what they would want, driving. And then one other thing that Madrid has to reckon with is a number 9 that can play like a pivot, like what Guirassy did a bit yesterday in Lewandowski. And Guirassy caused them some problems. And I think you could expect to see, I'm sure they watch those clips and they'll say, well, Lewandowski to play somewhat, which is something that he's done before. So like that's one difference between the two front lines that they can play this style where he could kind of back into the defenders and then get the other guys into play. Obviously, to your point, I think they will probably be a bit more conservative. Now, I don't know how. Ideally, if Gavi is ready, then it will be Gavi, Pedri, and Casado. Maybe that's the midfield 3 you play, and then you play Rafinha, Yamal, and Lewandowski as the front 6. So that would be probably the most conservative or defensive lineup Barcelona could put out there. Now, I don't know if Gavi is there yet. I think if he had one more game in him, or if he had one more game under his belt coming into today, I think that would have been a no-brainer. But I think he may not start. Like my guess is it's going to be Pedri and Casado. But then after that, it's a big question mark because between Ansu Fati, Dani Olmo, who hasn't played enough minutes, who's just coming back, Gavi, who hasn't played enough minutes, who's coming back, I think it'll be 2 out of 3 or one. Like, you have to make the choice. Do you play Ansu Fati just because he's been fit, but have these guys on the bench and bring them in the second half? So that's going to be and whatever happens today. Hopefully no major injuries, but that would dictate the final lineup.
Well, we'll see what Barcelona managed to do against Bayern Munich tonight. I guess we should move on to a prediction. We've got our ideas about the lineups. We've talked about ways that they can tweak their teams, I guess, as the match goes on. My broad feeling is Barcelona are better than Real Madrid right now. Real Madrid probably have more flexibility and approach. They can tailor their lineup a little bit more. Whether they can cover for their own deficiencies is another question. I do think the fact that we haven't really seen these guys play many big teams is very interesting. They've both played Atleti. Barca have played Monaco, but they went down to 10 men. We honestly have no idea how they'll stack up against better teams. I'm finding this one very, very hard to predict. I feel like it'll be low. I mean, ball could just, go goal, but it does kind of feel like this will play out quite drably, or at least that's going to be the intention. What's your prediction? Then I'll give mine. Why not? Seeing as I'm the host, I can let you go first.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth. The injury news about Courtois definitely made me think twice about my prediction.
Sure.
Originally, I was going to go for like a 1-1 type draw where Barcelona with a day less rest, playing away in the Bernabeu. A lot of young players, and Hansi Flick's first Clasico, they might take it a little bit more conservative, and so they would want to keep the game, not have too many chances, both sides. But I go back to a point Ted has made in the previous podcast about the teams don't know to defend anymore. Like at a fundamental level, the attackers are all so good, and so they may not, as much as they try, they may not be able to control the game that way. So I think there will be goals in this game. So I'm still leaning towards a draw, probably maybe a 2-2 draw now instead of a 1-1. I won't be surprised if Real Madrid nicked it at the end, like a 2-1 type game.
Sure.
But I think my prediction would be a 2-2.
Okay. Well, I think you're more optimistic about this game than I am. I was going to go 1-1. I do think that I just don't see Real Madrid being able to cover for their problems for a whole 90 minutes. It just feels like Lewandowski or Yamal will get an opportunity. But on the other hand, I think Real Madrid should be better at adjusting to stop Barcelona doing what they want to do. Whereas I think under Flick so far, we haven't really seen Barcelona change that much. They've kind of done one thing really, really well, and that's totally fine, especially when you're having to change over so much of the team because of injuries. You've got so many young players. But if they try and play radically differently away from home at the Bernabeu, I'm just not sure how much I believe in it. So I'm going for the closest thing I can to a cop out, which is a 1-1 draw.
Yeah. I think it's a safe bet. I think it's probably a lot of people's on mind. I think 2-2 is not that different from a 1-1, just another score draw. But I think that another thing to keep in mind is this is Flick's first Clasico, a new Barcelona where they are possession based, but there is a level of directness to their style and pressing that didn't exist before. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that, as you said, plays out in Madrid, in the Bernabeu, if they can press Real Madrid goal kicks effectively. And the other part is, as much as this is a Clasico, it is still not a Champions League game. I think Real Madrid plays them differently, or at least, obviously, there is no sane explanation for this, but it is not a Champions League game. So that would mean that, or what I'm trying to allude to is that there may not be this kind of crazy comeback in the second half, like against Dortmund. And Barcelona probably will also not melt under pressure like Dortmund. So there may not be a comeback of that sort. This may be a more tightly played game.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I guess, here is that there's more at stake for Barcelona in the sense that if Real Madrid were to lose this game, I don't think we'd really change our belief that Real Madrid will get rolling come February, March, and will be real contenders for the Champions League. Whereas if Barcelona are able to assert themselves at home against Bayern Munich and then go to Real Madrid and continue to play their game, despite having injuries, despite having people just coming back to fitness, then that will probably radically change our estimation of how deep they can go in this competition, how much of a threat they are to Real Madrid, even over the coming seasons.
Yeah, for sure. I think Barcelona has more to prove just because of the last few years, the turmoil and the turbulence last few years. Even though they won the title a couple of years ago, it's still, it feels like it isn't true, but they did win the title with Xavi. So I think, yeah, they have a lot more to prove, and they've had the great start to the season, whereas Real Madrid had, I think, 3 draws. Barcelona just lost the one game where they rotated. So yeah, I think they have a lot more to prove, and it'll be interesting to see how they approach this game.
So we've gone through our predictions for El Clasico this weekend, but there's another interesting thing going on, I guess, in Spanish football. I don't know, this kind of touches Spanish football, British football, German football. Sky Germany have been reporting that Leverkusen expect Xabi Alonso to leave next summer. Obviously, since he was rumoured for a move this summer, there have been some events. So Liverpool have gone and got a new manager. They seem to be very happy with him. He's currently got them top of the league. Bayern Munich have gone and got company, though I don't think that that's necessarily immutable, that situation. But it's interesting that Leverkusen kind of expect him to go. Pep Guardiola's contract is up next summer too. Ravi, you brought this story in. What caught your eye about it? What did this get you thinking?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of connecting dots happening here. One being Txiki Begiristain going to leave at the end of this year season, and Pep's contract being up at the same time. That has created a lot of news around the future of Pep and future of who's going to take the role at City. And obviously, Xabi Alonso, after winning the title with Leverkusen in unprecedented fashion, he was linked to all, Liverpool and rumored to all the big jobs, or he's being lined up for Real Madrid in the future. Now, all of that has come back. I think that obviously, if Xabi Alonso is available, it makes a lot of sense that he would one day manage Real Madrid. I think that there is a lot of, I think he's Spanish, he played there, he's a legend there. He's a really good manager. So I think all of those check out. I think where the Pep thing is interesting is because there is a little bit more finality to it, in the sense that, well, Pep hasn't renewed yet. So until he doesn't renew, every big coach that comes, there's not that many of them that you could say you could directly link to him. The other one so I think if you're looking about City, we heard when the news about Txiki came out that the rumored candidate is Hugo Viana, who is at Sporting, who the manager of Sporting is Ruben Amorim, who is also rated very, very high, very elite manager. So the logic at the time was, well, they get Hugo, then they get Ruben to City, so that's how that will work. Now we're talking about Xabi Alonso. I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think until Pep goes one way or the other, definitively saying he renews or he says he's done, I think we'll not hear the end of this. I think it'll be there. The chatter will keep going on.
Yeah, to me, Real Madrid seems like the obvious spot for Xabi Alonso. I mean, he's got the strongest connection to it, and while he played under Pep, I think Man City would have to put on a serious charm offensive to get him there. Plus, we have absolutely no idea what situation that club's going to be in next summer. But their next manager is a bit of a difficult question to answer, because they could get a massive points deduction. They could get a Champions League ban. They could get a transfer ban. They could get anything of this kind. Well, I guess they won't get a Champions League ban, but they could get points deducted so they're not in the Champions League. It just feels like there are relatively thin options for their next manager anyway. You could take a flyer on someone like Amorim. I think they probably would have hoped that Arteta would have shown himself to be a very good manager, but maybe that Arsenal weren't quite so close to a title so that they could just take him back. Either that, or we see names linked like Inzaghi. So I guess it makes sense that they'd be interested in Xabi Alonso. Yeah,
I mean, there's at the highest level, this used to happen, even in recruiting players. We used to, when we at work, we used to discuss this a lot. It's recruiting for Arsenal or for City. The player pool is very small. You don't have to scour the entire world to get players. Whereas recruiting for a team in MLS or a team in second division Spain, or you have a wide variety of players available, and you have a lot of arbitrage opportunities to do there. Whereas at this top end, there's only a few real candidates you're dealing with, and so I think there is that. So anytime somebody like Xavi Alonso news comes out, it becomes pretty easy to link them to the three big jobs that are available. I think Real Madrid is interesting because, well, Carlo Ancelotti has done a really good job, but you have to think that there is probably like a horizon in the nearby future that he wants to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Xavi is available now next year, then Real Madrid likely to be winning, at least close to winning the Champions League or competing for it as the season winds down. Not sure how that will play out. If they, let's say, if they go ahead and win the Champions League next year, then, and Carlo wants to come back one more year, so obviously there is a timing issue there with Real Madrid.
Yeah, it does sort of feel like that might be coming to the end of a cycle. I don't know. I guess that because there's been so much changeover in the squad, like by the end of the season, we might say, well, Real Madrid are just rolling, and you can't possibly consider changing things now.
Yeah.
But and so I guess every autumn it sort of feels like maybe Real Madrid should be thinking about what's coming next. But Ancelotti will have been there for 4 years next season. Alonso is, I'm not going to say he's like a once in a generation opportunity, but he might be. To me, it just makes sense to maybe be preparing the ground for this kind of move.
Yeah, and these things, especially with the big teams, none of this happens over like 2 months. These are a lot of these things happen over a longer period of time. There's a lot of groundwork, as you said, preparatory work to be done to do this. Now, every now and then, there will be rare instances where somebody gets available and they are able to do it, but that timing of synchronization doesn't happen often. So you have to prepare the ground from a year in advance. So this could be one of those where they are talking, or it came out now, but maybe they have talked, or they have some kind of, I don't think there is some agreement, but they definitely probably have talked.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I'm really excited to see where he goes next. It's been, I mean, obviously you kind of would love him to stay in Germany because it's annoying to see Bayern win the title relentlessly, and Dortmund seem incapable of getting it together. Leipzig have taken a weird step back as well. I don't know, just nobody there is terribly convincing. So it's been a bit of a breath of fresh air for him to be there, and especially for it to happen for Leverkusen. But I just struggle to imagine a world where we don't see Xabi Alonso Real Madrid manager in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think 2 years is a good number. I mean, I would say if he's like, I think the way his contract, I think it ends in 26, at the end of the 26 season at Leverkusen. I can see Carlo retiring in 2 years. I think that seems more feasible.
Mm-hmm.
But if Leverkusen is trying to, the news item is that the Leverkusen is trying to line up candidates for next season, which seems to indicate that, or we're too wishful connecting all these dots about, well, Pep's contract is up, so he's not going to renew, so there is an opening there. And as much threat there is of them getting a lot of sanctions, as you know how this world works, that they might not get any sanctions and they might be fine. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think that, if he at City, like, we could do another part about this, like, how will the squads line up? I think Real Madrid squad is probably something that, where he fits better than a City squad, how it was built, and how the players, and there is more structure around how that squad is built compared to a Real Madrid squad, where there is a lot more freedom to bring in somebody, because Real Madrid doesn't have really like, well, this is our game model, we're going to stick to this no matter what. I do think with Pep, they have a certain style, and they have been recruiting players for a style.
Yeah. Well, Ravi and I have put our cards on the table when it comes to Xabi Alonso's next destination, and with our predictions for El Clasico, but we would love to hear your predictions. Please put them in the comments below. You can tweet them at us as well. Be really interested to hear, and let us know if you would like us to go through potential lineups for Real Madrid or Manchester City if they were to hire Xabi Alonso on a future episode. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you subscribe to the Transfer Flow newsletter and follow us on Twitter. We really do appreciate your support, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.